Councillor Buchanan. I cannot see Councillor Buchanan. Yes, let me check. Yes, I cannot see Councillor Buchanan. We have present Councillor Chua Donnelly and also Councillors Fulton. We have apologies from Councillor Fulton, and Councillor Julia Mars is substituting for Councillor Fulton. And we have present Councillors Gowland, Handybot, Kea, Locat, and Councillor McDougall. In addition to that, we have the councillor leader. Actually, he will present later, and also Chief Executive Paul Manning, as well as colleagues from Audit Scotland. We also have a number of council officers present here. With that, Chair, I would like to pass back for today's business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to say, we don't have Councillor Fagan as yet. Hopefully he'll arrive imminently. So moving on to item 1, a declaration of interests. Do we have any declarations of interests? Not seeing any. Moving on to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Any questions or matters arising? Nope. Okay, I will move these minutes as a correct record.
I'll second them, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. And moving on to item 3, our good governance update and significant governance areas, Q2 progress report. And I'll go to Ian Strachan, Head of Administration and Legal Services, to speak to this, please. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members of the committee. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the Council's annual governance arrangements. As the committee will know, every year we undertake a comprehensive review of our governance arrangements, and this informs the governance statement that is included within the Council's annual accounts. The purpose of this report is to advise the committee of the findings from our annual compliance check against the local code of corporate governance, the outcome of the review of the code, and an update on the progress against the significant governance areas which were highlighted in last financial year's annual governance statement. In terms of the annual review of the code, we would ordinarily update with any changes following a review of our governance arrangements. Following the review this year, no amendments are proposed to the code. We made a few changes last year. The committee might be aware, didn't feel there's anything required this year, and a copy of the code is included at Appendix 2. Subject to committee's approval today, that would be uploaded to the Council's website. As regards the significant governance areas, we always provide an update at Q2, and that is included in Appendix 3. So if we move to the recommendations, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations, being that the findings from the annual compliance check against the local code of corporate governance be noted, that the updated local code of corporate governance in Appendix 2 be approved, and that progress against these significant governance areas in Appendix 3 be noted. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ian. Do we have any questions for Ian? Mary, want to speak?
Thank you for that report, Ian. I've got 2 questions. One, has the process highlighted any significant governance issues to date that the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee should be aware of, is one? And 2, will the actions identified in 24-25 be completed by 31st of March 2026, or do some of them extend into 26-27? Thank you, Ian.
Okay, thank you. I mean, certainly in terms of the review of the code, there was nothing to flag, and in terms of our ongoing work that we're currently undertaking around the annual assurance process that will inform the annual governance statement for this financial year, there's no significant governance areas that I would flag just now. For the committee's benefit, in terms of the actions identified last year, there were at sort of a resource level actions identified, and we track those at our sort of cross-service good governance working group, and those are being worked through, and they'll either be closed off or continued effectively and perhaps refined a bit going into next year, because what you'll And I mean, what I would anticipate and what you'll see with the significant governance areas that come through with the annual governance statement, when we've completed that work for this financial year, a number of those will remain. They might change a little bit as work develops, but that's probably not to be unexpected. So I'm content that actions that can be taken in close will be, and that some might roll on or refine into the next one if that assists.
Thanks for that, Ian.
Any other questions for Ian? Okay, thank you very much. I would move to approve the report.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Our Council Leader and Chief Exec can leave just now if you wish. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4, Internal Audit Plan 2026-27, and I'll ask Yvonne Douglas, Internal Audit Manager, to speak to this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the main purpose of this report is to present the 26-27 Internal Audit Plan and to comply with the Global Internal Audit Standards. There's a couple other documents that are attached to the report as well. Firstly, an internal audit mandate and charter, which you'll see is attached to Appendix 2, and also an internal audit strategy, which is attached at Appendix 3. As a service, we're required to comply with a set of professional standards. They are supported by a code and an application note that helps us apply those standards within a local authority setting. And the report captures some details of that, in particular in relation to the planning process, in paragraphs 3.1 to 4.9 of the report. Essentially what the mandate and charter is doing is it's setting out how we'll deliver the internal audit service in 26-27, and it sets out everybody's roles and responsibilities around that. The strategy is a slightly wider approach, and it sets out the delivery of the service, but probably helpful for the committee is it sets out the indicators as to how they'll measure our progress. So it's a useful reference document as we go through 26-27. You'll note the report's asking you to approve the mandate and charter as reflecting your expectations around the internal audit service that will be delivered, and also to endorse the approach that was set out within the audit strategy. The report then goes on to talk about the audit plan itself for 26-27, and that's attached at Appendix 4. Ahead of presenting the plan to you, we through a consultation exercise, we use that to gather ideas. We supplement that in a number of different ways with a wider review of top risks and also looking at previous internal audit work. And from that, what we do is we generate a total list of ideas, and we then go through and we risk assess those. For the committee's information, the criteria that we use are set out on page 64. Having gone through that process, that refines it down to an internal audit plan that matches the capacity we have. And as I mentioned, we've attached that at Appendix 4. What we try to do is show how that links into the wider council plan and also the council's top risk register. What we've also done this year is we've split the plan into different areas. So you'll see that it uses terms like assurance and non-assurance. Assurance are pieces of work that will inform the annual report that we bring to the committee. Non-assurance is work around likes of advice and guidance, consultancy, which definitely have a value but don't necessarily inform the annual report that we would bring to the committee. As always, we've got a commitment to undertake some fraud assignments, and the plan includes 181 days to do this. For the first time, we've broken down that 181 days, so you'll see at Appendix 5, and that's on pages 70 and 71. We're giving you a breakdown of how we intend to spend those 181 days, and the committee will be aware that we report back on a line-by-line basis. So this plan's almost like a starting point, a to-do list for 26-27, and that's what we'll report to the committee as we progress through the year. The plan is our estimate at this point in time in terms of the capacity that we have and what we think is the best use of the days, but we undertake reviews throughout the year, and you'll be familiar with the fact that when I come with activity reports, I sometimes come and ask for an amendment to the plan. So that process will continue for 26-27. Anytime we seek to amend the plan, it comes back to the committee for them to approve that amendment. I think that's the kind of main points within the report. The recommendations are set out at the start at 2.1. First of all, asking you note the requirements and responsibilities of the standards, that you approve the internal audit mandate and charter for 26-27 and endorse the audit strategy for the same year. And lastly, the proposed internal audit plan that we're presenting today, which are set out in appendices 4 and 5, is approved for delivery. And again, happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Yvonne, for that report. Do we have any questions for Yvonne? Aye, we've got Julia Mars, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions today. Does the plan provide sufficient coverage to support an annual assurance opinion? And also, have any high risk or critical areas not been included due to capacity constraints?
Thank you, Councillor. So just in order in which you asked the questions, the assurance within the plan, you'll see that's the sections that are set out. So we have the areas where we will undertake work of an insurance nature and areas where we will undertake work of a non-assurance nature. The vast majority of our work sits within assurance, so about 80% of our time sits there, about 10% in non-assurance and 10% in external clients. So I'm comfortable around the proportions in the plan, and that allows us to then report on it. The other question that you asked was around the risks and whether we had excluded any risks. No, as far as I'm concerned, all of the areas of high and significant risk were included in the plan. The reality is that we have a capacity, so we need to work to the capacity of the team. But I wasn't aware that, having gone through that risk assessment, that I was removing any assignments that I felt should be delivered. Probably comes back to that point again around review, and that we have the opportunity to continue to review the plan as the year progresses. So if that initial risk assessment proves not to be accurate, we come back to the committee with a revised plan. But I'm satisfied that all areas of significant risk I was able to include in the plan because I had the capacity to deliver. I don't know if that answers your questions, Councillor, or if you have anything further you want to come back on.
No, that's everything. Thanks.
Mary, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report, Yvonne. I've only got one question, and it's to do with your performance indicators. How do the performance indicators measure delivery of the plan? Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks. So when we come with the update report, you'll be aware of the fact there's always an appendix attached with a whole list of indicators. The purpose of those indicators is to give you that comfort that when you approve a plan at the start of the year, that we're making progress with delivering it. So you'll see there's specific lines within those indicators that measures delivery of the plan. There's two specific ones, one which measures reports to draft report stage. So what that's doing is taking the total number of assignments within the plan and it's reporting the percentage progress throughout the year. The other thing that we do report, which isn't until the end of the year, and you'll see within the annual report, is we look back at the total number of audit days. So when you look at the audit plan, it has a total number of days at the bottom of it. We do an overall calculation of the number of days that we delivered in the year, and we report that percentage within the annual report. We're usually close to 100%. We don't always spend our audit days in the way that we intended because we've made amendments throughout the year, but the principle of delivering audit days, we still deliver against the number of days that we have. But there's a couple of kind of key measures in there that will give you a bit of comfort. If you look at the update reports, you'll see within the appendices you're getting the information that gives you comfort around the overall progress.
Thank you for that, Yvonne.
Just one question from me, Yvonne. It's regarding, just to follow up on the capacity question, does your team have, or do you consider your team to have the tools and skills and training to carry out the role that you're looking for them to carry out?
We've invested quite a bit in training as a team. We now have access to an online platform that gives us training on demand throughout the year. So that's helpful for the team for our continual professional development, for us to meet for our own professional institutes, but it's also helpful going out throughout the year as well in terms of individual assignments that are allocated to auditors. So that's a really useful tool. We're doing a bit of kind of cross-learning in terms of our Excel and data analytics skills. We've got people in the team that are particularly good, but I think we would admit that across the team all skills don't sit at the same level. So we're trying to develop kind of core skills in all of these areas, develop materials within the team that we can share as well, which has actually been really helpful. And the other thing that we're trying to make better use of is AI tools, to the extent that they aid and assist. They're not a replacement for what we do, but they're certainly of great assistance, and we're trying to make use of those, particularly Copilot, which we're finding to be really useful in terms of summarising reports and summarising documents that gives us material that potentially we would not have been able to have invested the time in reading in full. So we're trying to kind of consolidate the tools that we do have, make sure we've got access to training materials, but kind of look to the future as well in terms of how we will need to work going forward. So all of these activities are happening in the background and hopefully in a way that supports delivery of the audit plan.
Thanks very much. Do we have any other questions for Yvonne? I'm not seeing any other questions, so in that case I move that we move to approve the recommendations in section 2 of this report. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks, Yvonne. Okay, so moving on to item 5, internal activity, audit activity report, pages 73 to 82 in your pack. And again, I'll ask Yvonne to speak to this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual activity report that comes to each meeting of the committee. This one covers 15th of November through to the 13th of February. The last activity report that the committee will get will be in May 26 for the 25-26 plan, and then the annual report will come in June. The plan that you've just approved, you will start to see that filtering through in the update reports that come after April. Just by way of a reminder, there's a link to the 25-26 plan included in the report at 3.1, and the box at 3.1 in the report gives you a very brief summary in terms of the overall progress. So the kind of key points that shows the progress that we've made in delivering the plan. The statistics that we have show that we've got good progress there, and we're projecting to have only one audit assignment outstanding at the time that I come with an annual report to the committee in June 26. So comfortable that there's a programme of work there that will support that report that will come to you in the early part of the new financial year. The performance in relation to the period to January 26 is set out at Appendix 1, that's on pages 79 to 81. You'll see that we're meeting all but 2 targets, and at 3.8 of the report on page 74, we're setting out those 2 targets and a bit of an explanation around those. Section 4 deals with the reports that we've issued in the period to 13th of February. Again, we've got a summary text box in there with the key points for you. This time it's at 4.1 on page 75. You'll note that we're reporting 16 assignments have been closed. 13 have been formally closed by way of a concluded piece of work. 3 relate to amendments to the plan, which was approved by the committee at the last meeting in December 25. In terms of 13 assignments that we've concluded, the scope of that is set out within the report, and the summary output from each of those is included at the very end of the report, Appendix 2, and that's on page 82. You'll note that the one assignment that we've shaded relates to a report where there was an action plan attached to it. In terms of assignments, they obviously generate actions, and our performance in relation to those as a council are set out in section 5, with the report noting that 95% of all audit actions were delivered on time in the period to 31st of January 26. I've referenced already this review of the plan, and I've undertaken another review as being the kind of final review of the plan before the end of the financial year. And you'll note on page 76 that at table on 4.5, I'm noting that there's one further assignment that I'm asking to defer The reason for that is it relies on fusion projects being implemented, and that's now planned to be implemented in June 26. So there really is no benefit in following up recommendations that will change again once fusion projects has been implemented. So I'm asking to be allowed to defer that time into next year. And I'm set now in terms of the proposed action, which is the last column in the table, how I intend to use the time, which is still within fusion, but not within projects, and it's to help with some complex accounting work that supports financial year end. So a real benefit in the work being able to be undertaken and a better use of time than what was originally intended. The final parts of the report give you an update in relation to the new standards and our level of compliance, and note that that will be formally reassessed and reported as part of the annual report, which will come to you in June 26, as I mentioned. So the recommendations are set out at 2.1, so asking that you know our progress and performance in the period, the output from the audit assignments that were completed in the period to 13th of February, and also that you approve the proposed amendment to the plan that was set out at 4.5. And again, happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that comprehensive report. Do we have any questions from the committee for Yvonne on the report? Mary?
Thank you for that report, Yvonne. I've got one question, and it's in regards to what is the 3 lines analysis mentioned in the report, and how is this used to analyse the risk? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the assignments that we closed down in the period. It's something that we've just recently started to use. It's a model that the Institute of Internal Auditors have developed, and the theory behind it that every risk is managed by a set of controls, and the model that they've developed defines these controls as falling into 3 separate categories. So first and foremost, the risk is managed at operational level. At a second level, what the model says is there's also overview, so that's like senior management committees, and the third level is internal audit. And what it does is sets out a good way for you to look at risks and how they're managed, because you should look at controls being in each of those 3 areas. It's something that we've just recently started to develop, and then what we do is we have a look at the assurance. So how do we get the assurance that each of those controls in each of those levels is working? We found it quite a good way, probably because we're accountants and we quite like kind of analytical, methodical things, so it kind of like suits our kind of brains, but it's been a really helpful way in being able to set things out, and it's something that we're looking to develop. And we've also been able to link into the Council's risk sponsors group for them to use that as well when they're thinking about risk, because essentially that sits within resources for them to think about the risks and the controls that manage. And when you're able to analyse out across those 3 categories, sometimes you find that the controls are maybe predominantly in one area, and what it does is triggers that kind of thought around, there are actually controls that we're not recording there, or are there other things that we should be doing to make sure that we have controls across each of those. We found it quite useful in terms of that third level as well, in terms of internal audit coverage, for allowing us to look at the top risks, to look at gaps in areas where we haven't undertaken audit work, for us to go back and kind of like justify that and understand why that is. Would it be appropriate? So it's been really useful for us from a planning. It's got a bit of way to go yet. I'm going to share a wee bit in my annual report around the assurance mapping side of it, but it's something you'll probably see referenced in reports quite often going forward, because it's been a really helpful model for us. That helps. But
thanks for that, Yvonne.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'm familiar with that myself as well from previous workplaces. So I've just got one question for you, Yvonne. Will the committee see a copy of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme that you referenced in 7.4?
Thanks. Previous standards, what we tended to do was include a narrative within the annual report, but for the annual report that's going to come to the committee in June, I'm actually just going to replicate the checklist and attach it as an appendix, because I think that's probably an easier way for you quickly to see what I'm saying against each of the lines, rather than having paragraphs with kind of narrative there that you need to kind of read through and interpret. So yeah, my intention is to bring that to committee and to bring it in quite a simple kind of format so that you can see at a glance. We've been working throughout the year to address areas of non-compliance. So we've now got the extended performance indicators, the formal audit strategy. So the kind of bigger areas where we felt that we needed to revise what we had in place, we have now done. So I'm not expecting to come to the committee with any significant areas of non-compliance. Our external inspection will be in the next financial year or the one following that. So that'll be the one where we have somebody comes in and assesses our level of compliance with the standards. But for the year that I'm just about to report to you in 25-26, it's a self-assessment exercise, but there will be a checklist that will hopefully give you a clear overview in terms of our compliance.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. That's answered my question. Do we have any other questions? Okay, if we have no other questions, I'd like to move to approve the recommendations at section 2, please.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Donnelly, Mary. So now we come on to items for noting, and we're moving on to the South Lanarkshire Council Annual Audit Plan for 2025-2026. That's on pages 83 to 104 of your pack, and I'd like to invite John Boyd, Audit Director of Audit Scotland, to speak to the report, please. Over to you, John.
Good morning, members. The paper you have in front of you is our annual external audit plan for the year ended 31st of March 2026. The plan has been prepared in accordance with Audit Scotland's Code of Practice and outlines our initial risk assessment and planned scope of our audit for the year. The format and structure of the report is similar to previous plans that were presented to the committee and is essentially split into two key areas: our audit of the financial statements, the annual report and accounts for the council, as well as our responsibilities with regards the wider scope aspects of public audit and best value. If I just touch briefly on the annual report and accounts and our audit work over the accounts. On page 6 of the annual audit plan, we've defined our audit materiality. Materiality is a concept within auditing standards that essentially considers what would influence the economic decision of the users of the accounts. Essentially, we can't undertake an audit of every single penny the council spends, and therefore we apply the concept of materiality to our audit work, and that informs our audit risk assessment. We set our materiality based on your gross expenditure. This is a consistent basis with other local authorities and public sector entities, essentially ensuring the focus of our work is on how the council has spent the resources that it has available. The 2% is broadly in line with other local authorities and consistent with our overall risk assessment and professional judgment. The other figure I'll highlight to the committee is our reporting threshold, which is set in page 7 of the plan. This figure is set at 1.3 million and is the figure that any adjustment, either adjusted or unadjusted, identified during the course of the audit will highlight to the committee's attention within our annual audit report. In accordance with auditing standards, we take a risk-based approach to our financial statements audit. This means we focus our audit resource and testing on areas where there's an increased risk of material misstatement to the annual report and accounts. Within Exhibit 2 of the paper, we've highlighted those areas where there's an increased risk of material misstatement. We've included the risk of fraud caused by management override of controls. This is a presumed risk in any financial statements audit, and we've outlined there where there's the greatest risk and susceptibility and opportunity of material misstatement through management override of controls, and we've outlined our detailed response as part of that. The conclusions from our work will be included in our annual audit report. We've also included a risk around the valuation of property, plant and equipment and the estimation of pension balances. These are two areas of significant estimation and judgment, and due to the material nature of the balances, there is an increased risk that they could be materially misstated through error. We've outlined our planned audit response as part of our audit work in the year. I would draw the committee's attention in relation to the valuation of property, plant and equipment. The SITFA LASAC has updated the Code of Audit Practice to reflect some of HM Treasury's reforms to public sector asset valuations. This will see the application of indices applied, essentially for assets not revalued in year. Between formal revaluations, there will be an indexation process applied, essentially to make sure that assets continue to reflect market movements without the onerous burden of more frequent revaluations being required. That change comes into effect for the 25-26 accounts, and we've included that as part of our audit work this year, and have already had early discussions with management in terms of the response to that risk. The audit plan itself, in terms of the annual report and accounts, also includes a response to the group audit. My opinion covers not only the council, but also the consolidated accounts of the wider group. And we've included in there the scoping of that work and our planned response to those risks. This includes detailed work over Strathclyde Partnership for Transport, where the impact on the group financial statements is material. In terms of the wider scope audit, our wider scope work covers financial management, financial sustainability, vision, leadership and governance, and the use of resources to improve outcomes. Within the audit plan, we've identified a specific risk around financial sustainability, and this is a common theme that we've identified across the local government sector and actually the wider public sector, recognising some of the significant challenges facing public bodies with this increased demand on services with limited resources that the audited bodies have available. The council itself has identified significant pressures with a savings requirement of 29.2 million over the next 3 years. And as part of our audit work, we'll consider the latest financial forecast from the council, the plans in place to address those budget gaps, as well as the assumptions underpinning the financial plans. We'll look at those for reasonableness. We've included in our audit plan the best value audit work. On an annual basis, the Accounts Commission reports nationally on thematic aspects of council's approaches to and performance in meeting best value duties. This year, the thematic review will focus on asset management and considering how the council is managing its assets to ensure high quality services, whilst also responding to some of the challenges in relation to financial sustainability and climate change. The conclusions from that work will be a separate report that we'll issue to the committee, but the key findings and judgments will also be consolidated within our annual audit report. At least once over the 5-year appointment, the Controller of Audit will report to the Accounts Commission on the Council's overall performance in meeting its best value duties. This represents the 4th year of the programme, and South Lanarkshire Council is due to be included within that cycle of best value assurance reports. and the planned reporting date will be December 2026. The Controller of Audit's report will focus predominantly on the conclusions and findings from our annual audit report this year, as well as the findings from our previous thematic reviews undertaken over the last 4 years. The audit plan itself also includes details of our reporting arrangements and timetable. As detailed within Exhibit 5, we anticipate and plan to conclude the audit work by the end of September 2026 and plan to issue an independent audit opinion at that time, ensuring that the Council continues to meet its statutory obligations with regard financial reporting. The audit plan itself includes the proposed audit fee for the year. The fee is set at a baseline fee, and local auditors have the opportunity to agree locally an increase in fee where there's anticipated additional work or significant risks identified that may require additional work in relation to those fees. We've not proposed an increase on the baseline fee for 25-26. We'll continue to monitor that throughout the annual audit itself and report the final fee as part of our annual audit reporting process. Finally, as part of auditing standards and ethical standards, as your external auditor, I'm required to maintain an independence from the Council and its group, and myself and the audit team confirm that as part of the annual audit planning process and throughout the audit, and will continue to do so as part of our annual audit report. I'm happy to take any questions on the audit plan or the wider audit work itself. Thanks.
Thanks very much, John, for that comprehensive plan. Do we have any questions for our auditor? No questions. I'll just ask a question myself then, John, just to ask if you have, I'm pleased to see the audit price isn't being increased to any great extent. So I was just wanting to ask if you've got the team in place to carry out the audit this year.
Annual audit process, we are required to consider both throughout the audit to make sure we've got the skills and experience to undertake the audit itself. And as part of our resourcing, we're confident we have the team in place for the annual audit for 25-26.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the committee? I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much, John. Sorry, apologies, the button wasn't pressed. So I'd like to move to note the report and for the committee to approve that.
I'll approve that and support.
Second that, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 6B, which is our South Lanarkshire Council Charitable Trust Annual Audit Plan. Running alongside the main one, 2025-26. That's on pages 105 to 120 of your pack. And I'd like to ask Amanda Barclay, Senior Auditor at Audit Scotland, to speak to this report, please. Do we have Amanda? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I present to the committee for noting our annual audit plan for the 25-26 external audit of the Council's charitable trusts. The plan outlines the scope of our audit, which will be carried out in accordance with the Code of Audit Practice and our responsibilities under the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Under the Financial Reporting Council's ethical standards, we're required to communicate any relationships which may affect the independence and objectivity of the audit team, and I can confirm that there are no such relationships to communicate for the audit of the charitable trusts. The materiality levels determined for the audit are detailed on page 110 of your document pack. Materiality is applied in planning and performing the audit, and whilst these are monetary thresholds which are outlined in the plan, it should be noted that some areas may be considered material by their nature. There's only one risk which has been identified through our risk assessment process that I want to draw to the committee's attention, that being the significant risk of material misstatement due to fraud caused by management override of controls. As John said for the council audit, this is a presumed risk in all audited bodies which can't be rebutted by the audit team. Our planned audit procedures in response to this risk are shown in the table on page 112. Due to the nature and the size of the charitable trusts and its limited financial activity, it's considered a less complex body for our wider scope audit work, and our work is therefore limited to concluding on the financial sustainability of the audited body. No wider scope risks have been identified through our risk assessment process. The audit timetable on page 115 sets out the key dates for the audit, which culminate in the signing of the audited accounts at the end of September, and the audit fee is detailed on page 116. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee on the audit plan for the charitable trusts.
Many thanks, Amanda, for that. Do we have any questions for Amanda on that report? I'm not seeing any questions, Amanda, so good luck with carrying out your report. I'm sure you'll do it to a high standard as usual. Thank you. So I'd like in that case to move the noting of this report, please.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, apologies for shuffling the paper around there. So again, what we're looking to note here is the Public Audit in Scotland Interim Evaluation, pages 121 to 124. And again, asking Yvonne Douglas to speak to this report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We bring Audit Scotland reports to this committee where it's relevant to the remit, and a report that was issued by Audit Scotland in December 25. Public Audit in Scotland is one such report. It's a very short report, just trying to bring the main points to your attention. By way of background, the committee will obviously be aware that Audit Scotland are the Council's external auditors, and that they form part of the wider group of public sector auditors that are responsible for auditing public sector bodies. The background to the report gives you a wee bit more detail on that wider public sector audit framework. Back in 2023, these bodies set out a shared statement of purpose for the public sector bodies. And in 25-26, what they've done is undertaken a self-assessment exercise that looks at the progress with delivering the outcomes that they set out in that statement of purpose. We've included a link to the full report on page 124, but the report itself summarises the main points for the committee's information in terms of main findings and recommendations, which are set out at section 4 of the report on page 122. From my reading of it, I don't see anything of particular significance to South Lanarkshire Council, but the report does note a series of next steps, and we've set that out in section 5 of the report on page 123. The intention is that a final review will be undertaken in 2027, and we're expecting that Audit Scotland will publish a report, at which point we'll bring it back to the committee in terms of their final evaluation. I can't see any particular actions for South Lanarkshire Council. The information is really in the report for noting, other than a continuing obligation to obviously engage with our external auditors in a constructive way. And I think that's probably the main points within the report. And the recommendation is really simply that you know the key messages, recommendations and next steps that are set out in the publication, and happy to take any questions on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Short and sweet for that one. Do we have any questions? Mary?
Thank you for that, Yvonne. Will we see any change in approach in South Lanarkshire Council given that the report makes recommendations?
Looking at the recommendations, I couldn't see any immediate changes, but I don't know if either John or Amanda would want to come in just to add maybe their perspective on that question.
John?
Yeah, thanks. I think what the are really trying to do with the recommendations is give examples of good practice and what good looks like from each example. There'll be aspects of that the council may choose then to pick up and adopt and take forward. But as you'll see from our own audit work, as part of our audit procedures, we consider this as part of our own analysis, and therefore you would expect to see come out from the annual audit report. So I wouldn't anticipate significant changes. If that makes sense.
Thanks for that, John.
Thank you very much. Just by way of a follow-up, is there anything that we should be doing as an audit committee to measure progress in delivering the recommendations? Yvonne?
I think just with all these reports, it'd just be useful to be mindful of what the report was saying in terms of the recommendations, and when reports are presented to you by external audit, just to kind of reflect on those recommendations and whether you can see that within the reports that are coming to you. But I think that's probably the best way in terms of just being kind of mindful of the points that are made, and you should see that being picked up within the routine reports that come to you throughout the year.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Okay, no other questions. In that case, I'll move to approve the noting of the report, please.
I'll second the noting of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Donnelly. Okay, moving on to item 8. So for item 8, we have the Audit Scotland Financial Bulletin 24-25 on pages 125 to 138 of your pack. And I'd like to ask Lorraine O'Hagan, Head of Finance, to speak to the report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. Item 8 then on page 125 is a summary of the Audit Scotland Financial Bulletin, which was published in January 2026, and also 2 supplementary reports that sit alongside that. So in terms of the Audit Scotland Bulletin itself, sections 4 and section 5 of your report cover the report in 2 separate parts. So the first part in section 4 is on page 126 and looks at council funding and financial performance, with the second part on page 127 looks at the financial position and outlook for councils. What we've tried to do in this report is to highlight the key messages from each section of the Audit Scotland report, and where appropriate I've added in some council context in italics underneath for your information. So an example of that is, a good example probably is section 5.1 item B, where we talk about financial challenges that councils face and looking at a focus on service transformation. And what we've done underneath that is just give you, for your information, just reiterated, I suppose, a number of the pieces of good work that we've been carrying out across the council from a transformation perspective, both in terms of trying to achieve financial savings and also looking at benefits in terms of operational delivery. Section 6 of the report goes on to look at the financial overview report in terms of areas where the council has been highlighted as part of a group of its peers, and gives you information on 3 particular areas, which is on bridging of council budget, so how we manage the council's budget gap. It looks at the achievement of revenue savings targets across 24-25, and it also highlights the level of debt for the council, again in relation to its peers across Scotland. Section 7 of the report on page 129 picks up on one of the supplementary bulletins then, which is the Local Government in Scotland Finance Bulletin 2025, and as it picks up on the 2026-27 Scottish Government budget. So again, what we've done here is highlight the key messages from that report for your information, starting in section 7.2 on page 129. And again, where appropriate, we've highlighted the Council's position just to give you a bit of context there. And all of this aligns to the information that you'll have seen as part of the Council's budget papers back at the end of February. The final section, section 8, is the checklist for elected members. So again, that's another supplement to the financial bulletin for 24-25. And that's really about highlighting to elected members the importance of understanding the financial pressures facing the council, how they impact on service delivery and on future priorities. And what we've done is we've put that appendix 1 into the pack to let you see the questions that are being posed for you as elected members to consider. And alongside that, we've given you some useful information in the section entitled What Do I Know? So it's to try and give you a bit of a pointer in terms of how you would answer those questions that have been posed by Audit Scotland for your consideration. And as I say, it's a good redirecting or a good reference point to find some of the key council information that we have out there in terms of the reserve strategy, updates on transformational reviews, looking at risk registers and capital monitoring reports. So there's a whole raft of information in there. And if members want to consider that, and if they have any particular questions that they want to pick up with me after the meeting, I'm happy to do that, because there is quite a lot in it. If I can refer you then back to section 2 of the report and ask that the key messages and recommendations of the Audit Scotland Bulletin in sections 4 and 5 are noted, that the commentary on the Council's position included in the Audit Scotland report in section 6 is also noted, that the key points from the Scottish Budget 26-27 supplement in section 7 is noted, and that the checklist for elected members in section 8 and appendix 1 is also noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Do we have any questions for Lorraine on the report? I'll just ask one, just ask the committee to look at that checklist for elected members. I think it's worth doing. There's also some links in there, and if you do have any questions or you think you would like some further information, Lorraine's offered to speak to you about that, so I just encourage people to have a look at it. Thank you very much. So if we have no other questions, I just ask to move to note the report per the recommendations in section 2. Thank you.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, moving on to item 9. Accounts Commission report, spotlight on culture and leisure services, and that's on pages 139 to 168 of your pack. I'd like to ask Michelle Wilkie of Performance and Policy Development to speak to the report. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The purpose of this report is to outline the findings from the Accounts Commission report Spotlight on Culture and Leisure Services, which was published in October 2025. The actual Accounts Commission report is included as an appendix at the end of this report. Just to provide a bit of background on the Accounts Commission report, like Audit Scotland, the Accounts Commission holds councils and other local government bodies in Scotland to account and helps them to improve by reporting to the public on their performance. This particular Accounts Commission report specifically reports on local government performance in relation to the provision of culture and leisure services across Scotland. At point 4 of the report, we outline the methodology the Accounts Commission used to analyse spending on culture and leisure services, primarily looking at local government finance statistics. We describe in the report how the Accounts Commission report outlines a number of Commission expectations. These are similar to recommendations, which it says will strengthen Council's understanding of the possible longer-term effects of the decisions they are taking now to address financial pressures within the leisure and culture sector. At point 5, we take each of these Accounts Commission's expectations and set them within the SLC context. So the first Commission expectation is that Council should be ensuring public consultations and effective equality impact assessments consider the longer-term outcomes when considering changes to the eligibility criteria or in relation to service charges for leisure and culture services. The Accounts Commission report states the current quality of EIAs, equality impact assessments, across local authorities varies. In response to this, at point 5.1.3, we outline how South Lanarkshire Council and SLLC have consulted with communities and residents on leisure and culture service charges and service changes generally. Our report mentions how we have completed impact assessments on price increases in leisure and culture charges as part of the budget setting process. We also carried out wide-ranging consultation on our leisure and culture services and facilities between 2023 and 2024, with 3 consultation phases and 14,500 responses. Equality and inclusion questions were also included in all 3 surveys. Looking ahead, a high-level public consultation exercise is due to be carried out on our estate strategy, with equality impact assessments completed as part of the decision-making process. At 5.2, we note Commission Expectation 2, which is to ensure council services are supported by clear, balanced and transparent local performance reporting and monitoring that can respond to and capture the impact of service transformation and wider reform. In response to this, we note here that South Lanarkshire Council and SLLC are developing a performance framework which will underpin the new commissioning plan. At 5.3, we note the third Commission expectation, which is that local authorities continue to proactively engage with the Improvement Service and other partners to expand the range of culture and leisure service indicators. In response to this, paragraph at 5.2, we go into detail about how within the reviewed performance framework just mentioned, there will be a reviewed suite of external indicators that collectively provide the South Lanarkshire context around health and well-being. And we confirm that we will continue to engage with the Improvement Service on the development of new indicators. At 6.4, we conclude by saying that throughout future service changes, we'll continue to ensure public consultation and effective EIAs are undertaken, giving consideration to the longer-term outcomes of any changes to either leisure and culture charges or leisure and culture service eligibility criteria. I refer you back to the recommendation at 2.1 to note the Accounts Commission report and key messages and expectations therein. Happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Do we have any questions for Michelle on that report? Okay, I'll just ask a question myself then, Michelle, with regard to the undertaking of public consultations and effective EIA, equality impact assessments. Are there any changes that you would be making to make sure they're of adequate standard and quality?
So the EIA process is fairly well embedded within the council now. We carry out EIAs for every sort of budget consultation on an annual basis, and in addition for any new policies or procedures that we're introducing that would have an impact on the community, or even in order to understand the impact, if there would be any impact on the community. So we definitely are undertaking a lot more impact assessments, increasingly so over the years. We've continually improved that process, looked at the sort of paperwork around that, looked at new legislation, constantly improved it. So I would say the EIA process is fairly well embedded now, with senior officers involved in every step of that and very aware of it. There's online training, etc. It'll continue to improve as time goes on, but it's in a good position at the moment.
Okay, thanks very much for that response. Any other questions for Michelle? If not, thank you for the report, Michelle. So I'd like to then move this report for noting, please.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. So come to the last item, our forward programme for future meetings, page 1690, 172. And I'll ask Ishara Opatha, our Administration Officer, to speak to the report, please. Ishara.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a standard agenda item at Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee meetings, and the background is set at paragraph 3.1 of your report on page number 169 of your pack. The purpose of the report is to advise members of the forward program for this committee, and in this case of this report, meeting are detailed up to 26th of January 2027 as detailed in the appendix on pages 171 to 172. Members are also invited to suggest topics for inclusion in the committee's forward program. The recommendation is set out paragraph 2.1, where the committee is being asked to note the forward program up to 26th of January 2027. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Do we have any questions on the forward programme? And also to remind everyone that you can put forward topics for inclusion in the diary for future meetings. If there's no other questions, I'll just thank the committee and the officers and the administration staff for all the good work done, and move this report, please.
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'll close the meeting now.